Good evening. My name is Brian Howard. I am the town manager in the town of Randolph. Tonight, we've put together a great panel of experts from across the industry to talk about the issue of water quality. And we're going to be focusing specifically on the town of Randolph. Let me go over a few of the slides in advance that I think will be of help to folks who are watching at home. So first off, again, this is the Randolph Community Water Meeting. We had one about a year and a half ago, Councilor Clifton, Councilor Huff-Lamon, and we wanted to update on the water treatment plant since then, and we also wanted to update on the issue of PFAS, an emerging contaminant that is now at a regulation by the Mass Dep, and we wanted to be able to have a conversation about that this evening. The agenda for tonight's meeting is a presentation by Mass DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, Helen Gordon, the Environmental Partners, and Andrew Dennehy from Beta Engineering. We have a series of questions that have already been emailed in. However, you'll also have an opportunity to ask them either through email at the address we have already provided, or you may be able to do that through the chat feature on Zoom. This is quite a list of presenters and panelists tonight. So we have Millie Garcia Serrano, Deneen Simpson, Nick Schuler, Kathy Baskin, Gerard Martin, Courtney Rainey, Jim McLaughlin, and they are all representatives of Mass DEP, some from the Boston office, some from the Southeast Region office. In addition, I have Andrew Dennehy, Senior Associate at Beta Engineering, and also Helen Gordon, who is the Senior Program Manager at Environmental Partners. In addition, Chris Pelletieri, the DPW Superintendent for the town of Randolph. And again, you will have an opportunity to submit additional questions through the chat function on Zoom, or you can email the Health Commissioner in the town of Randolph, Jerry Cody, who is doing the best he can to take in all the questions as they've come. Now remember, a lot of the questions that we've received have a repetitive nature to some of them. So we're paraphrasing and putting them together as to move the evening forward. So your question may not be specific to how you asked it, but the question itself will be asked. For example, a number of people asked PFAS and what is the current reading in Randolph? So just to give you an example on that. I want to give people who are watching at home, we're going to leave this up for a minute. If you are watching and you would like to in either Vietnamese or in Haitian Creole, we have an interpretation button that you can hit on Zoom, and you can join that now. So we're going to give folks an opportunity to do that. And those who join those rooms will have an opportunity to also use the question and answer portion to submit questions to the panel. So as the agenda said, we're going to start first with the representatives of Mass DEP. I've had an opportunity to work with a number of these individuals in my role as the town manager for the past number of years. They have been tremendously helpful to the town of Randolph, answering every question that I have, and they were more than willing to join us today to have this conversation around the issue of PFAS in the state and also any impacts here in the town of Randolph. So at this point, Mass DEP, take over the screen. You can now present.
Great. Well, good evening, and a big thank you to Brian Howard and Chris Pelletieri and the entire town of Randolph for inviting us, Mass DEP, to participate in tonight's public meeting. This is probably one of the best parts of our job when we actually have the opportunity to present in front of you and talk a little bit about our program, who we are, what we do, and why we do the work we do. So tonight we have a presentation titled Community Update Regarding Drinking Water in Randolph. So if you could kindly please advance, Nick, to the next slide, please. Maybe the one prior to that.
Are you able to see it, Millie? Can you see this? Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Good deal. Thank you. So first, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the Mass DEP staff, our core team, and explain again what we do and who we are. My name is Millie Garcia Serrano, and I serve as your regional director in the Mass DEP Southeast Regional Office. We are one of 4 regional offices across the state. And with me tonight is Courtney Rainey, the Director of Government Affairs, Municipal Partnerships. She works out of the Commissioner's Office. Deneen Simpson, who is Mass DEP's Environmental Justice Director. Nick Schuler, the Environmental Analyst in Southeast Region's Drinking Water Program. We also have Kathy Baskin, Mass DEP's Assistant Commissioner for the Bureau of Water Resources. Gerard Martin, Deputy Regional Director of the Bureau of Water Resources in our Southeast Region office. And finally, Jim McLaughlin, who's the Chief of the Drinking Water Program, also in the Southeast Region. So what is Mass DEP? Mass DEP is the state's environmental regulatory agency, and we work for you, the citizens of the Commonwealth. Primarily, Mass DEP enforces laws that protect our air, land, and water, in addition to also providing public outreach and compliance assistance to those who seek or need it or want it. Who is Mass DEP? Our team consists of scientists, engineers, lawyers, administrative and IT professionals who work together to move the agency's mission forward, which is protecting the environment and public health. Overall, there are 700 employees statewide, with just under 100 state employees working in the Southeast Regional Office. We are hiring, so I highly encourage you to take a look at our postings, which are located at Mass Careers website. It is our mission to also build a diverse workforce that meets the needs of the communities that we serve, like yours. So what do? We have a large number of regulations which we have to enforce. Many of these regulations require the issuance of a permit. When we write a permit, our goal is to balance the need of protecting our environment and public health, but also support our economy and public interest. We conduct site inspections to ensure that a facility is operating according to a permit's conditions. When they are not in compliance with our regulations, we can issue a penalty and require additional work. We also inspect contaminated sites to ensure proper cleanup, ensure the proper disposal and recycling of solid waste, and the protection of water resources. So tonight, we are talking a little bit more in depth with regards to the water quality of your community, which is one of our cornerstone programs with a large number of regulations, most of them which are modeled after the federal drinking water program. So what do? We work with federal, state, municipal, and citizen partners. We have a very strong partnership with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which is our federal counterpart, as well as local city and town governments, as we often have the same goals and we can enforce the same or similar types of regulations.
Millie, if I could just real quickly, I have a feeling, because I've seen your presentation, that the pages should probably be changing at this point, and we're seeing the map, so I just want to provide an opportunity to make sure that we're caught up.
We are right there. This is actually my one slide, so we are in good shape.
All right, excellent. Wanted to make sure. Thank you.
So right on point, the Southeast region, as you see on this slide, you may have heard of us, sometimes called the CIRO, Southeast Regional Office. We are home to 84 towns and cities. Our region stretches from the suburbs of Boston, like here in Randolph, to the Rhode Island border to Cape and Islands. And our region is really diverse. We have old industrial urban centers with legacy pollution, places like Fall River, New Bedford, and Brockton. But we also have the Assawansett Pond, which is the largest natural body of fresh water in the state. And we have more than 2/3 of the Massachusetts coastline. Again, all of these locations have very distinct environmental and economic issues. Just a quick synopsis of what our region looks like. We regulate over 9,000 facilities, more than 200 landfills, 473 public water supplies, and 50 wastewater treatment plants. We also oversee the cleanup of approximately 1,500 waste sites. So in a given year, our staff is going to be out there inspecting around 1,500 facilities and sometimes issuing up to 60 higher level enforcement actions with hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties, receive almost 2,500 wetlands notices of intent and close to 300 notifications of releases of oil or hazardous materials to the environment, which are needed in order for there to be additional cleanup and getting these locations in a situation that underscores protection of human health and the environment. We also review over 600 reports that are written by licensed site professionals and the assessment and cleanup of sites. And just to wrap up our efforts, we also respond to almost close to 400 calls, 24 hours, 7 days a week, with regards to emergency responses. And last but not least, our efforts to write and promulgate regulations that protect human health and the environment. So tonight, you're going to be hearing a lot about our latest and most recent drinking water rulemaking efforts to address an emerging contaminant of concern known as PFAS, or perfluorinated compounds. And as you can see, the Southeast Regional Office covers a lot of ground and a wide variety of issues. I may be jaded, but we believe that the Southeast region as a whole is representative of the best Massachusetts has to offer in terms of natural beauty, economic opportunities, and a diverse and talented workforce. And so to that end, it's my pleasure to be part of this forum. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Deneen Simpson, who is the Environmental Justice Director for Mass DEP out of the Commissioner's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Millie. Good evening. My name is Deneen Simpson, as Millie said. I'm the Director of Environmental Justice at the Mass DEP. I'm out of the Boston office, but serve all 4 regions as well as the Boston office. The town of Randolph, as you know, is designated as an EJ population based on minority and income. You can see from the legend the high population of minorities, and then the sections in green for income, and then the sections that's the darker green is both minority and income. Randolph has 19 block groups in the town, and all 19 residents that are either minority. Randolph has 19 block groups in the town, and all 19 have residents that are either minority or low income. Randolph is one of 7 municipalities in Massachusetts that are 100% environmental justice. As the director of EJ, I'm available to talk to you about Mass DEP's EJ program and how you can get involved and obtain access to information about Mass DEP's programs and how they may impact you and your community. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to this evening's presentation and future discussions. Back to Nicholas, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Deneen. Good evening, Town of Randolph. Today's presentation is going to discuss where your water comes from, how it's regulated, is it tested, and how is it treated. So a little bit about myself. My name is Nick Schuler. I'm from the Southeast office. I assist in the lead and copper rule as well as the revised total coliform rule. And as Millie stated earlier, I do inspections of water facilities all through the Southeast region, and we make sure to provide compliance and enforcement. As many of you remember through your elementary school, in regards to where your water comes from, water is evaporated from our oceans, lakes, and streams. Then condensation occurs, in which we gain our clouds, right? Then precipitation, which is our rain. Our rain falls, and then some of it percolates into the ground and becomes groundwater, while the rest of it becomes surface water. In the town of Randolph, you have surface water. Here we can see the town boundary, and we can also see Great Pond. If you look around Great Pond, you'll see blue with a little bit of stripes there. That's the protection area. Let's take a closer look here. Now, in regards to water quality, groundwater and surface water can be really different, right? With surface water, it's out in the open. So pesticides, fertilizers, livestock being around it, pets, all that can affect our water quality. It's really important that we protect the area around Great Pond, and that's why we have protection areas that are regulated under Mass DEP. Now, Great Pond serves the Randolph-Holbrook water treatment plant, and it also serves Braintree water treatment plant. I want to make it known that all residents are provided with treated surface water. In regards to regulation, the Safe Drinking Water Act was passed in 1974, and it authorizes the EPA to set national health-based standards to protect against naturally occurring and man-made contaminants, right? Think about manufacturing, the pesticides that we talked about, fertilizers. It also requires actions to protect the drinking water, right? We want to protect the rivers, the lakes, the reservoirs. We gain that power from the EPA. So Mass DEP is given something known as primacy. We're given authority from the EPA, and we have our own standards and guidance. Our regulations are called 310 CMR 22, and we also have guidelines and policies that are available online. EPA, Mass DEP, and public water systems all work together to make sure that you're provided with safe drinking water. As a side note, I want to make it known also that if you have a private well, the Safe Drinking Water Act is not applicable to private wells. That would be your local Board of Health. Now, testing of Great Pond. Testing of Great Pond, it occurs in several different ways, right? We want to analyze for coliform bacteria. Coliform bacteria is an indicator organism, and that could actually show that there's the possibility of E. coli. Many of you have probably heard about E. coli, and it can cause gastrointestinal issues, and it can really harm people that are immunocompromised. Randolph-Holbrook also tests for inorganic compounds, such as metals, nitrate, perchlorate, synthetic organic chemicals, which come from pesticides, volatile organic compounds, such as benzene, toluene. And then an emerging contaminant of concern that Millie mentioned earlier is PFAS. Every year, you get something called a consumer confidence report. Now, this is mailed to you, and it should be mailed to you by July 1st. The most recent one that I was able to find online is from 2020. Randolph-Holbrook has met all standards under Mass DEP's regulations as of the 2020 CCR, Consumer Confidence Report that I reviewed. Now, this is where the magic happens, right? The existing plant was built in 1936 for Randolph-Holbrook. It's staffed 24/7, 365. The lines, some of the lines are from the 1800s, and currently there is work being done to create a new plant that will replace Randolph-Holbrook and the Braintree plants. So all three are going to be treated as one. It's going to be Randolph-Holbrook Braintree treatment plant. Now, in regards to treatment, prior to use from Great Pond, remember you're being given treated water. It's filtered to remove particles and sediment. It's chlorinated as disinfection to address any biological contaminants, such as the coliform, fecal coliform, E. coli. And also corrosion control treatment is added to the pipes to prevent the pipes from breaking down and getting into your water. Now, let's recap. Where does your water come from? Your water comes from the Great Pond. How is it regulated? It's regulated by EPA, which has authorized us as the DEP. Is it tested? Yes. It has many tests such as coliform, volatile organic compounds, and the emerging contaminant that we discussed earlier, PFAS, which is going to be discussed in more detail by our next presenter. And how is it treated? It's treated by filtration, disinfection, and corrosion control treatment. Now, our next presenter is going to discuss PFAS in more detail, and she is our Assistant Commissioner, and her name is Kathy Baskin.
Thank you, Nick. And thanks very much to the town of Randolph for hosting us this evening. So I'll be talking about PFAS and drinking water and Mass DEP's new regulations for overseeing the concentration of PFAS in drinking water. Next slide, please. So perhaps you have already heard about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS as they are called. But just in case you haven't, I will give you a little bit of a recap. So these are man-made chemicals used in stain-resistant, water-resistant, non-stick products, firefighting foams, food packaging, all sorts of products that have made our lives much more convenient over the last 50 to 70 years. They have brand names like Teflon and Gore-Tex, Scotch Guard. So these are all products that have helped us. And now we are finding out that there are impacts associated with these chemicals. One of the biggest impacts is that they last for a very, very long time in the environment. They are nearly indestructible. They're called forever chemicals. And so they persist in the environment, and they move from, if there's a spill, the spill may result in contaminated soil and then contaminated groundwater. It's very hard to get rid of it. Even when you remove it from drinking water, for example, you don't destroy it. It just gets removed from drinking water and then transported somewhere else. It can be destroyed by very high temperatures through incineration, but even that is not perfect every time. So it's very difficult to manage. It is linked to health risks also, especially in immunocompromised individuals and women who are pregnant or nursing, as well as infants. So think months versus years of exposure with a pregnant or nursing mother or an infant. Next slide, please. So this is just a mashup diagram of where you can find PFAS. And, the bottom line is really everywhere. So you may have over in the upper left-hand corner, some kind of factory that produces a PFAS containing compound and emits discharge through emits PFAS through its smokestack, but also creates products that we have grown accustomed to. These products, like the jackets or sneakers or cosmetics that we have purchased, turn into waste. The waste goes to a landfill. The landfill may leach or seep into the groundwater. That could cause problems in the drinking water. On the other hand, upper right-hand corner, firefighting foam, something that's essential and life-saving over the years. Firefighting foam was used to put out fires, but also there's been a lot of practice fire extinguishing by our firefighters in our training academies. And nobody realized that there were PFAS associated with the foams that they were using to practice on. Those contain PFAS, and they have contaminated some of Massachusetts groundwaters. This gets into the food supply, this gets into the bloodstream, and can cause exposure in humans. Next slide, please. So Massdep has been doing a lot of work over the last several years to first consider PFAS and understand it better, and then ultimately regulate PFAS. We first followed along with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which in 2016 issued a health advisory of 70 parts per trillion for 2 of the PFAS. Now, keep in mind, there are several thousand PFAS. They can't all be detected by laboratory methods that have been accepted. And we are regulating 6. So there's a lot to learn about PFAS, but there is some that we already know. So US EPA studied the 2 most commonly used PFAS and developed a health advisory for the sum. Based on that information and that science that was collected, Mass DEP analyzed that science and developed its own health or health-based guidance for drinking water, which was a sum of 5 compounds at 70 parts per trillion. As the science developed and research was being conducted around the world, our thoughts around or an understanding around PFAS evolved, and we revised our guidance in 2019, lowering it from 70 to 20 parts per trillion and adding a 6th PFAS. So while 2 were studied most intensely by the US EPA and others, there are others that are structured in a similar manner. And so we have determined that those are similar enough to potentially cause the same types of health effects. And so we've included them in a class or a group together. So the sum of the concentrations of those 6 are what we're looking at. And ultimately, that was put into regulation in October 2020, where those same 6 PFAS have a limit, the sum of those 6 PFAS have a limit of 20 parts per trillion in drinking water in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. Now, how does this compare to the rest of the country? This is looks like a very complicated table, but I'll give you a few examples. And we're really pretty much in line with where the other states are. So keep in mind at the very top line of this table, the US EPA has a health advisory of 70 parts per trillion for 2 of the PFAS compounds. And by the way, I believe that Congress may have just, or they are considering requiring that EPA regulate PFAS if they haven't passed it already. So this is likely to change. But so we're at 20 parts per trillion for the 6 PFAS that are listed across the top of this page. Other states have something similar. So for example, Vermont has a sum of 5 PFAS with a limit of 20 parts per trillion. Other ones, like, let's go down the page to Michigan, MCL, it says, and you'll see across the page 16, 8, 6, 51. So they have, rather than having a sum of 6, they are regulating each PFAS individually. And that's why they have a lower limit for some of those, lower than 20, 8 and 6. But generally speaking, we're in the same ballpark, and certainly nobody is really up at the 20 parts per trillion for 2 PFAS anymore. Next, well, I should say not nobody, the folks who are regulating. There are many other states that are not regulating, and they are waiting for the federal government. So those states that are regulating are close to where Massachusetts is, but it's a lot of work to regulate, and many states are looking for the leadership from the federal government to do that. So Mass DEP has taken action on regulations in a couple of areas. The first was to define cleanup standards under the Massachusetts contingency plan. So this is for your waste sites, and to determine how you should clean up soil and groundwater once it's been contaminated. And the groundwater that could be used as drinking water is now required to meet a 20 parts per trillion standard. That came in first, and then the drinking water standard followed about 10 months later. And it's based on the same science, and that's why we have the same limit. So we have our researchers at the Office of Research and Standards who take a look at all the data and advise the commissioner and others in state government on what the science is telling us. Next slide, please. So a couple of things that I should mention about the standard. So a standard that tells you you can't have more than a certain amount of PFAS in your water, but there are also other things that are required. So for example, because the science is evolving, we required of ourselves to take a look at the data every 3 years and evaluate whether the science is changing and if we should be incorporating something new that would inform our standard setting. We also require that folks do monitoring. And so that's something that Randolph certainly has been involved in and understands the consequences and implications of that. And as I mentioned before, there is not yet a federal standard. However, we are expecting that the federal government may take action on that. Next slide, please. So we have, with respect to the MCL, or that's the drinking water standard, so we call it MCL, it's the maximum contaminant level. I did mention that we have an assessment every 3 years that will be looking at the data, and that's done by those experts I mentioned earlier in our Office of Research and Standards, who are toxicologists and other scientists, chemists. They take a look at the data and they make recommendations. And this is data not just that's collected by water treatment plants, but this is data that's developed by researchers from all over the world, including some universities right in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So I'll tell you who this MCL or drinking water standard applies to and who it doesn't. It applies to community water systems such as the system of Randolph's. And it also applies to what we call non-transient, non-community water systems. It's a very long name for those public water systems that serve smaller than a community, but a place that the same people show up every day. So they may not live there, but for example, perhaps they're workers at town hall and the next door DPW, and between those two entities, there is a public water system, but maybe the rest of the town is on private wells. So that type of system where the same people show up every day and they're drinking that same water, they are regulated. The public water systems that are not included are transient non-community water systems. Those are the types where people show up, but they may not be the same people showing up every day. Maybe it's a restaurant or a campground. So we are requiring that they take a sample so we understand whether there's contamination there, but we are not regulating them completely the way we are with the others. And then consecutive systems. So think like the MWRA, which serves many communities. The MWRA is required to test, but the city of Waltham, the city of Newton, the town of Reading, they are not required to test because their testing has already been done by the MWRA. Next slide, please. So we all know this is a very expensive and challenging problem to deal with PFAS in water supply. There is some funding available, and so it's good for folks like Randolph to know about that. There were 2 supplemental budgets that were passed by the legislature in 2019 and 2020, which appropriated $8.4 million for testing of public water systems, so free testing of private wells, and also to provide design grants for systems that were need to build new treatment plants or come up with some other type of remediation. So I believe that Randolph has been able to take advantage of the free testing that was made available through this program. Next slide, please. There's also the Clean Water Trust, or the State Revolving Fund, and that is a fund that was established by the US EPA with the US EPA's money, with some Massachusetts money thrown in. It's handled by the Clean Water Trust. You can think of them as the bank, but the organization that selects the projects is Mass DEP. So this is for very low interest loans. And for PFAS, PFAS is a high priority of the Clean Water Trust and Mass DEP. So those projects where towns are proposing to remediate PFAS go to the top of the pile in terms of being looked at favorably, and are much more likely to receive funding. There are 0% interest loans on PFAS. And so far, we've funded nearly $200 million, $180 million for 16 projects. So you can see it is very expensive to address PFAS in a system with contaminated water. It doesn't mean that every system that has PFAS does need to do a very expensive treatment system. Unfortunately, as you know, Randolph-Holbrook and Braintree, as they're designing a plant together, are addressing this, and it will cost will cost money to do the treatment. Other towns are more fortunate where they can turn a well off, for example, or get water from a neighboring system, and the costs are much different. Next slide, please. So far we have received samples or sample results from about 600 of the 1,700 public water systems in Massachusetts, including all the large ones. And many of the systems are reporting no issues with PFAS, which is terrific news. But we are working with about 24 community systems, and those are the ones that serve municipalities, on short-term and long-term measures because they have discovered elevated PFAS concentrations. Next slide, please. There isn't a tool online at Mass DEP, which we call the Story Map, Mass DEP's PFAS 6 Story Map. And PFAS 6 is the nickname that we gave the sum of the 6 PFAS compounds that we're regulating. So lump them all together and we call them PFAS 6. So this story map explains to the public what is PFAS, where has it been found, what's being done about it. And so I highly recommend that you check it out. You could probably just Google Mass DEP PFAS story map and find it. So it's a great tool. Next slide. And now I'm pleased to introduce Gerard Martin from the Southeast Regional Office. He's the acting Deputy Regional Director for the Bureau of Water Resources, and he'll be giving the next part of this presentation. Thank you.
And when Millie was introducing me at the beginning, she started to say that I was with the Bureau of Wayside Cleanup, which I was about a month and a half ago. So I've just started working with the Bureau of Water Resources, working on water supplies. So bear with me this evening. And Jim McLaughlin is here, who's the chief of the drinking water program, to keep me honest and let me know if I say anything wrong. Next slide, please, Nicholas. So the PFAS 6 and Randolph drinking water has been monitored now for a bit, and these are the results over this so far in 2021. And you can see we've got these 6 different PFAS compounds, and then you add them up to see whether or not they exceed the maximum allowed level for water. And when Kathy was talking about it, it's maximum allowed. So you can have water with 20 nanograms per liter of PFAS 6, and it meets the requirements. It's if you go above that where you're having issues. It's also based on averages. So it's not a one-time thing. So you can see there At one point, we did exceed the 20, but when you average it with the other sampling rounds, it was below the 20. So the water in Randolph is compliant with the new regulations, but because we are seeing PFAS, the town has to do a few things. And I apologize, I did put in the June results. That again, I think that the PFAS 6 and that was 20.2. Another thing that's done when you're looking at these numbers is it's based on two significant figures, so you kind of round down when you have that. So that would round down to 20. And so our average is still below the maximum contaminant level of 20. Next slide, please. So because we're seeing PFAS in the water, the town is required to send out public education to the customers. So the Randolph and Holbrook Joint Water Board mailed out the public education this past April, and indicating it's not a violation, but also included information on the results, what the PFAS 6 are, information about what the customers can or should do if they'd like, and then information on what's being done by the water board to address the PFAS issue. Because we're hovering right around that 20, you don't want to sit around and wait for it to go above the 20. So the water board is working on that now. And because of the environmental justice communities in the town, they also provided information on how the environmental justice community can receive that information in their language. Next slide, please. So on the short term, they're continuing the monthly sampling of the drinking water. And one of the things that the public education notice points out is that boiling the water will not destroy the PFAS 6. I know a lot of times you'll be watching the news and the news will talk about the need to boil water. That's if there's bacteria in the water. The boiling of the water will kill the bacteria. But in fact, what it does if you boil water with PFAS 6 is that the water evaporates and the PFAS 6 concentration can increase. So you don't want to boil the water in these cases. And the town is also evaluating options for providing alternative water to sensitive subgroups. And they've actually submitted a plan to us to have a vending machine available for the sensitive subgroups to get water if they feel more comfortable using that water instead of the water that comes from the tap. And I believe we've approved that, and the town's in the process of finalizing their plans and getting that up and running. So those are the short-term things that they're doing to try to deal with the PFAS that's hovering right around that maximum contaminant level. The long-term approach, as was mentioned by Kathy, is they were in the process of designing a new regional treatment plan to deal with those normal things that Nick talked about, removing the sediments, chlorinating the water, adjusting the pH so that the pipes in the distribution system aren't impacted by the water. But now they're also looking at what can we do to address the PFAS issue. And that is the subject of our next presentation by the town's consultant engineering firm.
Thank you, Gerard. I appreciate everybody from Mass DEP for their presentation tonight. We're going to be going to questions in just a little bit. As was just mentioned, Randolph is not that you're ever in a good situation to deal with the issue of PFAS, but we're actually fortunate in some ways that we're in the process of building a new water treatment plant. And the reason I say that is in attending the presentation at the legislation meetings going on at the state level, there was a presentation by a number of communities. Hyannis is spending almost $22 million just to deal with the issue of PFAS. Randolph, because we're building a water treatment plant, is fortunate that we're able to put this into the plant that we're building and constructing. So while nobody wants to deal with this issue, clearly, we are fortunate in the sense that we have the ability to build a new plant and deal not just with this issue, because there'll be other emerging contaminants, and we'll make sure that this treatment plant has the ability to adapt as necessary. Joining us next, and we want to talk about the water treatment plant. This is something we talked about on Monday when we were setting the water rates. At this point, Helen Gordon of Environmental Partners, who is really a key partner to the town of Randolph, but to all of the three boards. This is a joint board presentation tonight, but I can tell you that Helen's work and her organization on the tri-board has been top-notch and doing a great job on behalf of the residents of Randolph. Helen, you're on.
Unmuting might help, correct? Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us tonight. Town of Randolph, I really want to talk to you about what we've been doing for both Randolph and the joint board, and as well as Tri-Town. I won't stay too long on this particular slide. This is just to really say that your treatment plant has been around for a long time. It was constructed in the 30s. There have been several upgrades over the years. It has exceeded its life expectancy, and the town was prepared for that to happen and started discussions with the Tri-Town Water Board to potentially do a regional facility. And now we are doing that. Just a couple of quick statistics. Your current population in Randolph that's being served is 34,362, and Holbrook is 10,791. Average day demand is running about 2.99 MGD with a max day of 4.22. So this is a quick update on what we've been doing with the community for upgrades at the existing water treatment plant. As I said, the last upgrade was in 1991. We began design for the Tri-Town Regional Facility in 2018. The Joint Water Board, in addition, had environmental partners conduct a 5-year capital and O&M study to ensure that we would keep the treatment plant operational while we were getting ready to design and construct the new water treatment plant. Just after submission of that particular analysis, where we did recommend replacement of pumps and so forth, there was a finished water pump failure, as you may all recall. And the community was able to appropriate funds that they had already had in their retained earnings of $3 million to do upgrades for finished water pumps and electrical upgrades. So you've already spent that money, and now you have brand new pumps available for that. In addition, we're doing other upgrades as needed on a case-by-case basis. And the last multi-phase upgrade was completed October of 2020. The anticipated schedule for the operations of the Tri-Town treatment plant for all three communities will be 2024. So the new treatment plant is going to be designed with GAC filtration. So that's granulated activated carbon, which is one of the major treatment processes that's accepted as something that can take out PFAS. It doesn't destroy them, as Ms. Baskin indicated. It only removes them from the water supply. The design began in 2019. We are currently at 60% design, and we're going to be submitting to the state in October of 2021 for them to begin their review. This is just a quick layout. The treatment plant is over by the existing Braintree water treatment plant. There will be 2 subaqueous transmission mains brought over to Randolph, where your existing treatment plant is, and that will service you. This is a 3D kind of stick layout of the campus that we'll be seeing. This is where the finished water pumps will be, the pumping station. This is the clear well, and this is the process area and the administrative and operations area. This just gives you an idea of what we're looking at now for the finish of the architecture. It'll be block and fit in with kind of that old New England style. We're projecting right now that we'll begin construction June 2022, and we're moving to have the project construction time period be 24 months. With the goal of being operational by 2024. So I did want to give you a little update here on the costs and the funding associated with the Triton treatment plant. So we did receive funding through the PFAS design grant program for $200,000 for the design, towards the design of the Triton treatment plant. And this plant is also on the intended use plan under the state revolving loan fund. So we're using all available funding to reduce as much as possible the cost to the community and to the customers. Right now at 60% design, we have what we call an opinion of probable construction costs. We've broken it up between treatment plant costs, subaqueous transmission main, and then the engineering costs. When you put those together, the total portion of the Randolph cost for the project is $26.3 million. We're seeing about a 7% increase in our initial cost estimate that we had prepared in 2018 and 2019. When we did that, we didn't have much of a design, so we did use a healthy contingency when we did that estimate, and that's why we're fairly close to what we were saying the costs were going to be. So I just wanted to, I was going to go quickly through the PFAS timeline. I think the important pieces to note are the town tested for PFAS well in advance of the requirement for them to do so, because we were designing a brand new water treatment plant. We wanted to make sure that emerging contaminants were addressed. So the testing was done, and it was identified that there was PFAS over 20 parts per trillion. There was confirmatory sampling done in August, and then right after that in September, the joint board, so Randolph-Holbrook, who operates the Randolph-Holbrook treatment plant, asked environmental partners to look at alternatives to possibly put in interim treatment at the treatment facility to take out PFAS. We put the community advisory in place, which is the notice that DEP was talking about earlier. And then we finished our analysis and came up with some interim solutions in March of 2020. The joint board was required to begin officially their compliance monitoring in January 2021. However, again, as I indicated, we've been testing for a while now, since July 2019. And the end of this month, beginning of next month, I understand the kiosk will be put into place at the DPW as the interim solution, rather than going to treatment at the existing treatment plant. The treatment technologies we did look at, we took into consideration operational changes, constructability, capital costs, and O&M costs. And the thing that's unique about Randolph is your treatment plant is so old that there's a lot of upgrades that need to be done just in order to put in some of the new treatment alternatives. We looked at activated carbon, granular and powder. We also looked at ion exchange and membrane filtration, nanofiltration, and reverse osmosis, quite expensive. And the RO facility is actually the type of facility that the kiosk is going to be utilizing. That's been approved by Mass DEP as the interim solution. So the town and Joint Water Board has determined that the interim solution will be the kiosk, with the ultimate solution being a brand new water treatment plant. When we looked at, I just wanted to give you an idea about the complexities of your treatment plant and expansion at it, you have a very, very small footprint. And so any additional equipment that needs to be added, we need to find space for. We just did a very cursory alternative analysis, and the only place we could find for the GAC vessels are over the said basins. We would have to do a structural analysis to ensure that they could carry that. So there's still more design that would be needed, and we're most likely would be a year away from implementing anything structural at your existing treatment plant while trying to keep the existing treatment plant operational. And there would be some permitting associated with that. And so that is why the decision for interim, as I said here, wetlands is another issue that we have to deal with because of the small footprint. And those GAC vessels do have to be winterized, so we would have to construct a building. So there'd be some timing for design, emergency procurement, delivery of equipment, and then startup. So a 6-month minimum, most likely a year away. I won't get into this. These are other constructability and O&M issues and challenges, and I know we're running out of time. In terms of why the interim solution appears to be the best for the community, one is it will provide non-detect PFAS in the water that's supplied from it. It is an easy installation. There's no additional water treatment plant O&M maintenance costs at the existing water treatment plant. It's cost effective. On behalf of the community, we did submit a request for interim funding, which is available, and I believe we should know sometime around October. I haven't heard specifically when they're going to pick what projects are going to be funded through that. And that might help with reducing the cost of the interim solution. The system already comes winterized, and the cost is significantly lower than what the cost would have been for upgrading the treatment plant. And again, because we're building a brand new treatment plant as a long-term solution, adding all that additional capital upgrades to the treatment plant was considered not cost effective and not economical for the community. And that's all I have on my presentation slides, Brian.
Thank you, Helen. Now we're going to have a brief presentation by Andrew Dennehy of Beta Engineering. He's going to focus on the infrastructure of how the water gets from the water treatment plant and how it gets to your homes, and provide an opportunity to talk about our Unidirectional Flushing program. Andrew, when you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. You can see my screen?
We can.
Okay. I've edited a little bit because I think Nick and Helen did a good job with a little bit of history of the system. So I'm going to dive right in to kind of explain what Randolph has done over the last 20 years. These are some pictures of what unlined pipe looks like when it's been in the ground for 40, 50, 60 years. This is a water main. This is a before and after picture of what Randolph has really done for, most of its system, probably about 99% of it. You can see the before and after, what it looks like either replaced or lined. So I think it was 2000, DEP issued an ACO, which is an administrative consent order, asking Randolph to really focus on its water system and the water quality. And over the last 20 years, you've spent a lot of money to fix your water system. It began in 2001 with a $5.5 million CIP that was funded by the town. I'm not going to get into how much linear footage were replaced or lined. I have a slide that kind of captures that over the 20 years. But you can see in 2007, there was another 8 million appropriated. 2009, another 4 million appropriated. 2011, different funding sources. DEP's SRF program helped out a lot. There was when the ARA funding happened, that also helped. And then finally, the last round of funding, Randolph funded itself between 2015 and 2017. And so the long story short, between 2001 and 2021, you've spent about $35 million to improve the water system. And what does that mean? It's 120,000 linear feet of cleaning and lining of unlined pipe. You've replaced almost 100,000 linear feet of pipe. You've transferred from smaller mains that were unlined to lined pipe. That's about 30,000 linear feet. And then you've added, about 10,000 linear feet of looping, which means dead ends are now looped. So this is what it looks like. Okay, this is the amount. You can see that the pink is cleaned and lined. You can see the blue, that's been replaced. You see the looping here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you've looped a lot of dead ends. You've tied over several spots. A lot of work has been done. And so once we've done that, the next step was to flush these mains. Okay, so we've instituted a unidirectional flushing program, which is a method of cleaning these water mains to improve the water quality and operations and restore capacity. It's a more effective way than flushing than just if you get a dirty water call, you go to that area and you flush. The program is something that it's a systematic program where you start from your treatment plant and you begin flushing from there in a systematic way where you close valves and you're pushing the water out and any sediment, tuberculation out through the hydrants. And so the program is a 5-year program. Randolph began in the fall of 2020, year one. They followed up in the spring of 2022 with year two, right? So it's an accelerated program rather than doing it in 5 years. Brian, I think you're planning to do it in 2.5, which is the first 2 years have been done. And the third year is projected to be done in the fall of 2021. So while we flush, tuberculation and other sediment is forced out through open hydrants. And the point is to get this sediment out. So it is normal to have occasional dirty water while we're doing this. And that's why Brian and his staff have made a concerted effort to notify any residents in the area of flushing, to explain that the purpose is to disrupt this sediment and force it out. So you may get dirty water complaints. So Helen, if I could stop sharing, there is a video that we can play, kind of highlights this.
Can you see it at all?
We can, yes, thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian Howard. I am the town manager for the town of Randolph, and I am here today to tell you about our unidirectional flushing program and the ways that we're trying to improve the water quality for the residents of Randolph. The town of Randolph, through its Department of Public Works, has begun its unidirectional water flushing program. Unidirectional flushing is a method of cleaning the water mains through a network of flushing sequences by discharging water from a fire hydrant. A unidirectional flushing program involves closing valves in a specific sequence to create water movement in one direction while opening specific hydrants at the end of that sequence. Maintaining the flushing sequence is important so that the water used in the flushing sequence remains clean. This technique creates high water velocities by isolating certain sections of the water mains, which allows for better scouring of pipes and at the same time uses less water than traditional flushing. Flushing will dislodge and remove mineral deposits, sediments, and biological deposits that have accumulated in the water mains over time. These deposits may have resulted in water color and water quality problems and contributed to the corrosion of some of the pipes. The benefits of this program include maintaining and potentially improving the water quality levels. Flushing can also reduce bacterial growth, improve color and turbidity, control corrosion, and help restore flow and pressure in the water distribution system. I hope this video helps to inform you of the steps the town of Randolph has taken to improve its water quality. For more information about unidirectional flushing or the town's water system, please visit the town website at www.townofrandolph.com. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. And I also want to thank Randolph Community Television for helping us produce that video. We put that video together about a year and a half ago to really explain the unidirectional flushing program. Randolph has done spot flushing in the past. A lot of the work that Andrew was talking about as they were doing the lining of the pipes, they weren't able to do some of the flushing that you would want to do and disrupt the system during that. So we're taking on a very aggressive unidirectional flushing program, which we are compacting 5 years down to 2.5 years. And I know there's a question on how much more we can compact it. And we're hoping to go a little bit more, but we still have to balance the overall water needs of the town, the overall water pressure within the town. Again, if you are watching on Zoom, you can submit your questions through the Q&A feature on Zoom. You can also email Jerry Cody, and RCTV is putting up his email address. I will say, based on the number of questions we have, I'm not sure there's many topics that we wouldn't be able to hit based on what folks have had here. So what I'm going to do is start first, in particular, on questions around PFAS. There was a question that says, how many communities are above the limit of 1 but below 20, meaning that they may not be hitting the new MCL, but they are having detectable amounts of PFAS. And I would leave that to the folks from DEP to provide us some background.
Thank you, Brian. I'm not sure if anyone on the DEP team has that information readily available. I do not, but we could certainly get that and send that to you as a follow-up. I have to say that finding PFAS in the water is not uncommon. A lot of systems have found that lower level that the person who's asking about, or PFAS that are not in the PFAS 6. But even those PFAS that are detected that are not in the PFAS 6 are of concern to us. We want to know if they've they've appeared in the sample. So we can get that number for you.
And I want to let folks know, all of the presentations here tonight are going to be on the town's website tomorrow. This video will be on the town's website tomorrow. And there will be plenty of questions that are asked that may need some additional research. So we'll get those answers, and those will be on the website also. So this is a continuing program of us to try and meet residents where they are and provide information on the water treatment plant and PFAS.
So Brian, sorry.
Sure.
So this is Millie. I am with Kathy that it would be best for us to provide you more accurate number, or a number that represents the information that's being sought. I do want to talk a little bit for a minute about another mechanism for sampling, which is embodied by the free PFAS program for private wells. And that is a separate apart effort, also funded by monies from the legislature, which basically is focusing on 84 communities across our 350 cities and towns that depend on private wells. So if your community has 60% of the residents or population that tie into private wells, you are one of the 84 communities. We are now working in collaboration with the University of Massachusetts, Amherst and Lowell to get that outreach. And in the Southeast region, we are very active communicating with local municipalities, towns, boards of health, DPWs, fire chiefs, et cetera, to garner information with regards to the locations of private wells. So this may not apply to Randolph, clearly, but for communities that do depend on private wells, we also have that information that we are collecting as we go.
Thank you. And just a little bit of background in Randolph's case, almost 99% of the folks in town are serviced by the town's water versus private wells. So it's a very small number, but it's going to be good for us to be able to work with those folks, because we're going to give everybody the opportunity to know what their PFAS level is and how they can remediate it in any way. A question is, why is Massachusetts specifically regulating just the 6 PFAS that are listed in today's presentation?
I can take a stab at that. So first of all, there's very little information, although there are several thousand PFAS that are in the environment or manufactured. There are only a few dozen that we can measure with accepted laboratory techniques. So for example, the one of the approved laboratory methods gives us the results of 18, and another one that we're about to approve gives us the results of 24, some of which overlap with the 18. So it's not even a unique 24. So there is very limited ability right now, technical ability to measure PFAS. Also, there haven't been a lot of studies, as certain PFAS are being phased out. So the ones that occurred more frequently, PFOS and PFOA, have actually been banned from being manufactured in Massachusetts, although they still come in through other countries into the US. And at the same time, manufacturers are developing replacements. So the science is having a very hard time keeping up with all that, and also the health effects of these compounds. We can't measure them, so it's very hard then to determine what the health effects are in people. So what we can do right now is focus on the compounds that we know a lot about, and then those ones that look very similar with the same number of carbons and fluorines on that chemical, so that we have confidence at least we're capturing a class that's of concern. What we're hoping is that the science will develop, we'll learn more about these compounds. Also, we're hoping that treatment will remove many of the compounds that are in addition to the PFAS-6, maybe not all of the compounds, but we're hoping that the treatment will help with respect to some of these other PFAS that less is known about. So I know it's a difficult answer to hear. We wish we knew more.
And that's really a key component of this, is that this is a emerging science. This is an emerging contaminant, and we're going to continue to learn more in the future. This next question, is there a connection between levels of PFAS in the blood and increased risk of COVID infection? I'm not aware of any. Our health commissioner is not aware of any. I don't know if anybody else would like to add in on that topic.
I would say that I have heard in general that there are suppressions in immunization that are associated with PFAS exposure. So it isn't COVID, but necessarily, but just that immunizations in general may have less effect. But in terms of contracting COVID-19, I have not heard of anything that suggests that increased PFAS makes you more likely to contract COVID-19.
The next question is Poland Springs, or I suppose any bottled water, safer? My understanding is that these companies may in fact provide the information of whether they are PFAS free or not, or what their levels are, but they're not regulated in the same fashion. Can somebody speak a little more about that?
I can say a little bit about that. So you're right. The bottled water is not regulated in the same fashion, and it's not regulated by Mass Dep. However, it is regulated by the Mass Department of Public Health. And now that there is a drinking water standard with the maximum contaminant level for PFAS, the DPH is requiring that bottled water companies test for PFAS-6 annually. And so that is something that you should be able to get information on from the Department of Public Health. Also, there is information, some bottling companies have done this of their own free will in advance of the MCL, and some of that data, the data that they've reported out to Mass Dep has been posted on our website.
And I also know, just because they have also been promoting their number, Randolph has a water kiosk in town, spring of the Rocky Mountain, and they have on their website that they meet and exceed the standard. But as you mentioned, that's something that the Department of Public Health is continuing to work on. How often is sampling data collected, and where can it be viewed? There's a few different types of data. There's the PFAS, and then we have the regular data that we test at the water treatment plant. We do put those up on the town's website, and we've been doing that for about at least over a year now. Councillor Gordon has been asking us to do that, and we've been doing it. But in addition, I know correct me if I'm wrong, the state DEP website actually can let you look at any community's water results.
That's right. So the data are available on a data portal that's operated by or managed by our parent agency, the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And, if I can find the website, I can put it in the chat. Otherwise, that's something we can provide to you, and you perhaps you would, if you want to put that on your website, you're free to do that, of course.
Absolutely. If we don't have the link, we're going to get it up after tonight. And again, I know that we put up a PDF of our reports that get sent to the state. There was a question about last March. We had a notification that went out. That notification went out because of lack of notification by the town to the Mass DEP about a E. coli reading, if I recall correctly. And even though the testing quickly showed that we were in compliance, we did not notify DEP within the set time frame. And we then had to send out the letter that went out. Am I summarizing that okay? I don't know if Gerard or I know some of the folks from the Southeast region that we worked with, but I'm trying to summarize that briefly as to the nature of that letter.
I think Jim is probably the best person to confirm that.
Right, but I guess in general, anytime that there's a regulatory requirement for notification, we always encourage everyone who is regulated and has to respond to that notification to do so in a timely fashion to avoid any potential non-compliance. So with that, I'd like to then send it over to Jim McLaughlin.
You're referring to the public education statement that was mailed out?
Yes.
Yes, so that was sent out in March. I believe that was put on the earlier.
No, Jim, I think he's referring to an E. coli hit.
We had a notification issue where the previous DPW superintendent had it notified within 24 hours DEP on a hit. And then the testing showed that we were in compliance, but based on the fact that DEP was not notified, we were required to send out a notice to everyone, letting them know that there was deficiency. Is that a safe summary, Jim?
Yes. Basically, that was a flag on the play, to go to a football analogy. You were okay with testing, but there was a failure in communication, and so there was a violation issued for that. And anytime a water system receives a violation, the public needs to be notified so they know what's going on.
We have a number of questions about the slides that talked about where PFAS come from, and that there could be businesses in Randolph that could be adding to the issue of PFAS in the systems. This is really a statewide issue. I know this has been talked about at those legislative meetings. Where do we stand as far as trying to specifically determine how the PFAS is getting into the water system? And the state, how are they looking at the issue of the industries that may be playing a role in PFAS entering into the water stream and into the environment?
Great questions. Oh, go ahead, Millie.
Oh, so I was just going to say in general, and it is a great question. I have to definitely side with Kathy on this. This is really the bottom line. Our department has focused our initial actions and response to ensure that the water is pure and fit and safe for drinking. So that is our first priority. Along the same lines and in parallel construction, then we have the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup in collaboration with Kathy's group, the Bureau of Water Resources, trying to do the investigatory line of evidence work to better understand where is it coming from? Where is the contamination source? So that is not forgotten. And often the secondary conversation that happens when we have discovery of perfluorinated compounds, PFAS-6, in the municipal drinking water. So I'd like for Kathy to expand upon that, as well as Gerard Martin, please.
Thanks, Millie. So Millie, you raised a really good point about one of the places where we find out about PFAS contamination. And as I recall, there were two parts to this question. One was around where do we stand on understanding what the sources are, and the other is more directed towards industrial sources and what we're doing about them. So the waste site cleanup program helps us to better understand where these sources are coming from. And one of the ones that came up first as the very often or very frequently found to be associated with high levels of PFAS in groundwater is the aqueous film forming foam, or this is the firefighting foam that I mentioned earlier. So in locations around military reservations, fire training academies, even fire stations that had done training, and even there's talk about maybe around sites where there were fires and the PFAS foam, the PFAS laden foam was used. Those would be places that we would look for in terms of sources of PFAS, and also that we understood better through our waste site cleanup. But we're also discovering more potential sources through our waste site cleanup program. And we're also requiring that data be collected. So this is a second way of discovering what's associated with it. There are a couple of new data collection programs that we've started in the last year. One is to take a look at what the concentrations of PFAS are in wastewater residuals. So that's the sludge that comes from a wastewater treatment process. And historically, there have been three different ways or a few different ways that it would be disposed of, one of which is to be used as a soil amendment. So there's about 38% of the residuals that are generated in Massachusetts that are used to enhance the soil. And that's been called beneficial reuse, and it's been widely accepted as a good practice. Now we're understanding more about PFAS, or trying to understand about PFAS concentrations, how high are PFAS in residuals, where do the PFAS, do they move from the residuals to the soil, to the groundwater? So we don't know a lot yet. We haven't decided how we would regulate this, if at all. But what we are doing is asking those folks that land apply residuals to collect data and do the analysis to let us know what the concentrations are. The same thing with wastewater discharges. So we have recently found PFAS exist in our rivers at about the same concentrations that we're finding in the groundwater, in the water supplies. And while this is not as much of a public health threat, Millie said we're focusing on drinking water because that's where the exposure is. We know it's out there and we're not sure where it's coming from. So one place where we want to have more information about is at wastewater treatment plants. How much is coming in and how much is leaving? And in terms of how much is coming in, that's the part of the question, the second part of your question, what are we doing about industrial discharges? So in addition to asking these or requiring these wastewater treatment plants to tell us or measure the amount of PFAS coming into a treatment plant, we're also asking them to be in touch with those industrial discharges that send their wastewater into the municipal wastewater treatment plant, so that they have a better understanding of what's coming into their system. We do have folks in the state government who work on toxics control under the radar without oversight from the regulators like us, who can go into an industry and help them come up with alternatives free of cost. So their services are free of cost, and they don't turn around and report anything to DEP. In fact, we don't even know where they've gone, but we are offering that up as a service that an industry could take advantage of. So we're just starting to scratch the surface, but those were really two great questions. Thank you.
And then as Millie and Kathy mentioned, the waste site cleanup program can get involved to try to identify what the source might be. It's obviously it's critical to find out if PFAS is in our drinking water so that we can take steps to remove it before it gets out to the customers. But it's also good if we can identify the source area, because if there's still soil or if there's still discharges that are occurring, we can either try to do something with the soil to stop the PFAS from getting into the groundwater or into the surface water, and therefore into our drinking water supplies. So the waste site cleanup does have a site or source discovery project that they can go out and try to identify what the source or sources might be. The way that PFAS does behave in surface water actually can be helpful for us site discovery projects, because we can sample streams and keep going upstream, and then maybe we stop seeing the PFAS, so we kind of narrow down where the source might be. In the case, as Kathy also mentioned, one of the biggest sources of PFAS that we're seeing so far is the firefighting foam that's been used on fires. So we see it associated a lot with airports that are required to use the foam because of FAA regulations. But you might also see it, a roadway spill could be the source of the firefighting foam. There are down at the Otis Rotary on the Cape, there were 2 truck rollovers where the firefighting foam was used back in the late 1990s, and it impacted the groundwater. The groundwater is impacted still from those releases. And if you look at where the water supply is in Randolph-Holbrook, Braintree, running right through the north of the area is I call it Route 128 because I grew up in Hingham, and that was always Route 128 to me. I know that section's not Route 128 anymore, but to me, it always will be. But if you look at that, the highway runs right through there. So there could have been a tanker truck rollover 20 years ago where foam was used, and that PFAS may still be there at that location and slowly leaking into the groundwater and the surface water every time it rains. So it can, in those cases, it's going to be actually difficult to identify the source. Sometimes we can track the PFAS right up to a facility that has used it and it accidentally got into the groundwater. And if we do that, if we do find a facility or a company that has impacted the groundwater with PFAS, we issue a notice of responsibility requiring them to do an assessment on the best way to clean it up. And hopefully we can get that source area addressed through the Bureau of Waste Cycling.
Thank you, Gerard. And for what it's worth, I still call it 128.
Okay.
So there was a question about the restaurants in town, whether or not they have filtration systems or not. That's really a question you would have to ask each of those facilities. I know that a number of them do. I know that a number of them have always had them. And whether or not they're going to adapt them to the issue of PFAS is something that you would have to specifically ask each business. I will say that, and this kind of rolls into the next question, which is Randolph is dancing around that 20 number where 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, we've been going back and forth. And probably the number one question we've been asked is there, and what effect does that number have on people who consume water? And I know there's still a lot of unknowns here, but what is the best way that could be answered as far as, okay, there are communities at 40, 50, 60. The federal number was 70. Well, Randolph's dancing around the 20. What does that mean to residents who consume the water?
I just want to, just a general commentary. I don't know if this is going to fully answer or inform the individual that has asked this question, but as Kathy noted, the Office of Research and Standards is really the scientific arm of Mass DEP with a director that basically focuses on toxicology, risk assessment, epidemiology, and all sorts of scientific subject matter expertise to arrive at numbers that are protective of human health. And sometimes the environment as well, predicated on whether it's a groundwater standard. All these standards are risk-based, which means that there are certain levels of conservatism, layers of protection, so that we can actually ensure that a low number takes into account scenarios for individuals with immunocompromised health or children, for example, infants. So there is a lot of conservatism. So with regards to setting a number at 20 parts per trillion or nanograms per liter, that is pretty good in terms of trying to ensure that we have arrived at a number that serves to protect human health. So note that case in point, the Federal Health Advisory is set at 70 parts per trillion. There's in the world of trying to get at how conservative or protective a number is, we have attempted to add more layers of protection to get down to a lower level, at least lower than the current health advisories that have been published by the federal government. So again, we're focusing on that population, the population at large that does not have those concerns. Our posture has been that it's okay to drink the water.
And I just want to let Helen and Andrew know, I'm not letting you off the hook. I'm just going heavy on the PFAS questions at the beginning. There are plenty about water treatment plant and distribution coming up shortly. But I know that the folks from Mass DEP have already gone past their time frame with us. So I'm trying to focus in on those PFAS questions while they are present. Luckily, we've actually gotten a significant portion of them answered at this point. What I would like to do quickly, just so that I can go through, because there are so many questions that have been asked, and I'm trying to make sure that we don't ask the same question over and over and over. We do have a question specifically about the water flushing program. So Andy, I'm going to send this over to you. This resident lives specifically off of Mill Street, and based on her understanding, that is going to be the last section of town that'll be flushed, and may not get flushed until spring 2022. With the record rainfall this month and the current cooler weather, why can't we do this faster? Andrew, we've talked about this probably on a weekly basis, as far as we've compacted it from 5 to 2.5. What else can we do? So Andrew, if you could take that.
Yeah, there has been a record, July rainfall. I think if we knew that, we certainly could have conducted flushing this month, but I don't think any water operator during the months of July and August would recommend flushing. So, I mean, that is, had we known, we certainly would have. But it just, you don't know. The weather could turn tomorrow. The pattern can change. We could have an August that's 100 degrees and no rain. And then you're into a situation where your reservoirs are low, and you're concerned about water bans. So it just, we flush in the fall, we flush in the spring. And that's the conventional wisdom. Hindsight being 2020, certainly, yeah, we could have flushed in July, but I'm not sure that anybody would ever recommend that.
And I will say, obviously, flushing during the winter time frame is just never a good idea. But I will say that whenever those opportunities exist, where if we think we can get a couple of the main streets and some of these side streets done, and we've done that already, where we started doing part of Oak Street and those side streets, we're going to try and do it. So wherever we can push the limit, we're going to, but we have to balance the full needs of the system. So
yeah, and I would add to that, Brian, just simply that it's not, hey, let's go out for a day and flush. Right. The program is set up to do it over 5 or 6 weeks to get the system, that area of the system, flushed. So it's not something, hey, let's go out and we'll do that straight. It is set up. You need to flush that year, that area. So it's not as simple as, hey, it's a good time right now, it's raining, let's go flush.
Absolutely. Helen, real quickly, and you touched upon this, the original pre-COVID cost of the plant was, give or take, $68 million between the material cost increases based on COVID, and also with delays in getting a hold of product. Do you expect this to significantly increase the project and or the timeframes of the water treatment plant getting online?
I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I would have been able to predict the pandemic like everybody else. So I can only speak to the experiences that we're having right now. There definitely is some delivery challenges through manufacturers for equipment, particularly when we're working on a water treatment plant. The type of equipment that we're putting in is very specialized and can take longer. We are seeing some of our current projects being delayed slightly by about 3 months. It's really hard to predict where things are going. And it does also have a lot to do with how many projects are going to be coming out to bid at the same time. We'll be looking and tracking this very closely. When we set the original budget and cost estimate, we had a conservative contingency because we had just been through a period of construction where construction costs were historically increasing higher than we had ever seen before, and that was pre-COVID. So the most recent cost estimate that was done by AECOM, and then we did a comparable one ourselves for the 60% design, we're still running around. I'm seeing more of a cost on the subaqueous materials than a major increase on the treatment plant. In terms of the construction period, we'll have a better sense of that as we finish the design. So in the next few months, we'll have a better idea of how it will all come together, how we would if we were going to construct it, build it, and come up with a solid deadline. So I'm not trying to not answer it, but it really is difficult time right now. Between manufacturing and the lack of labor, we need laborers, and it's a challenge right now.
And a rolling question from that was about not only what could the plant cost, but what may it cost the residents. Now, the town of Randolph, over the past 6-7 years, has, through its town council, been putting retained earnings at the end of the year, a significant portion, into a fund to be able to pay for the new water treatment plant. So we have about $8 million in there right now. There was a discussion at the council meeting this past week where how much more should we try and build into the rates right now? And so that's a conversation where it's tough for us to say what it's going to cost, because each year there are decisions made on how much to stock away so that we're not paying interest costs. And just to give you an idea, and this has been discussed a few times in this presentation, is that just as an example, if the town was to borrow $14 million for the water treatment plant, if we are able to continue to qualify for Mass Clean Water Trust funding, which is at 2% versus the rate of, say, 4.5%, that's the difference of almost 11 million in one hand in interest and 4.7 million in interest on the other hand. In addition, we're going to continue to apply for grants anytime that those opportunities exist. And the federal government, we know that anything we can do to use some of the funds that are coming in for this plant, we're going to do so. So there are so many moving pieces to be able to say specifically what it may cost the residents. We really can't answer that. I can tell you that anything we can do to lower the cost, we're going to do without a doubt. So as far as what the final costs are going to be, that's a tough one to answer. A lot of folks asked about specifically what is your plan to lower the PFAS levels. I think Millie gave and Kathleen gave great answers about why Massachusetts chose the level it did and what that safety level means. I will say, and I'll be the first to say it, I say it at town council meetings, I am personally comfortable with the 20 MCL, but I know not everybody is. So one of the other questions that's been asked is, what is the plan to be able to offer water that does not have or has lower PFAS levels. And there's been a series of questions about it. And yes, you saw on the slide from basically, we are opening up a water kiosk probably no later than 2 weeks. As Gerard mentioned, we're going through the permitting process. We have at this point exceeded all of those. So we're very close to being able to open up that kiosk. In addition, we're going to hopefully be able to open up a secondary one. The town of Easton opened up theirs, give or take, about a month ago. So we've been looking at what their numbers and levels have been of usage, and we're looking at that. And I know that the folks in Blue Drop, there are about 15 or 16 other communities that are also looking to do this kiosk-based system. Again, Randolph, because we tested early, are ahead of the curve as far as being able to offer a secondary water option to residents. So then there were folks who were saying, well, if I choose to buy a bottled water, will the town reimburse that? Well, we've made the decision that we're going to make this water available. So if you want to be able to, just as you can at the Rocky Mountain, bring your water down, there will be no charge for that. And it'll be open 24/7. It's at a facility that the police and fire use throughout the night. It is something that the DPW uses throughout the day. And of course, we have cameras and other security measures down there. So I know Councilor Gordon has specifically asked, will it be available to all residents? Our goal is yes. Our key component, of course, is the sub groups that were talked about. However, we are going to make that available, and we'll let everybody know when it's open and when it's available to residents. There was a question about PFAS, and this person sometimes notices that when the ice cubes in the fridge are gray, could that be an indicator of PFAS?
I am not aware of a color indicator for PFAS. So, maybe somebody else, I see Jim just raised his hand.
I just want to say that this is at a parts per trillion. So right. You're not going to see that. A grayish hue, maybe anything in the water, but most likely air. Lots of times when you have air in the water, that will create a little bit of a hue.
And absolutely, Jim, because that was a definitive issue in Randolph. At the same point that the water treatment plant, the pump went down. When we were putting in the new pump, we were having issues with air getting into it. And you could pour the glass of water and 20 seconds later it would be clear. But in the meantime, yeah, it was gray.
Right. So, Brian, I didn't see a chat in here, so I did email you a couple of links. And that's why I was a little distracted when it was my turn to answer a question, because I was actually trying to find the EEA data portal, and I sent those to you. But I also, our Office of Research and Standards did a couple of analyses for us for results that came in. And I think it would be very helpful to read directly from this Office and Research Standards if you have time for me to give you a couple sentences.
Sure.
The PFAS MCL encompasses a subgroup of 6 closely related PFAS that, due to their close structural similarities, meaning, as Kathy said earlier, how the molecule is made. So due to their close structural similarities, similar toxicities and long half-lives are treated additively. So that's saying that they started with PFAS and PFOA, and Massachusetts added these other compounds, the 4 other ones, because they are structurally similar. So then this analysis goes on to say the MCL value of 20 nanograms per liter is based on non-cancer health effects and represents a level of PFAS-6 in finished drinking water at and below which consumption of water is not expected to result in any unacceptable health risks for all individuals over a lifetime of consuming the water. the MCL is also applicable to shorter duration exposures to sensitive subgroups, which then led to the 3-month average. So I hope that answers a little bit of the concern that if you don't have any health effects or health concerns, that this 20 is based on 70 years of drinking the water.
That is very helpful. And there was another question which may tie into that. Is there what level of PFAS would it actually be considered undrinkable? Now, we know Randolph is nowhere near that number, but is there a number that the state would look at and they would say, you know something, we would need to do something here?
So I'm going to answer this question in a way that may trigger other programs to weigh in and comment.
Sure.
The site cleanup regulations, the ones that Gerard Martin used to basically enforce, and he's now with the Water Resources Program, look at a condition that is titled critical exposure pathway, which means if it's there, the state basically enforces or has the ability to enforce some sort of interim immediate response action. So the premise is no exposure equals no risk. So that's very important. We have actually coordinated and discussed and communicated and derived a benchmark number that equates to an imminent hazard. And again, I say that, but I need to explain, kind of alarming term, imminent hazard, equating to 90 nanograms per liter, PPT. But that imminent hazard is, as Jim described, for certain, we need to take into consideration exposure duration. And in this case, that actual number is to signal that within 5 years from discovery of that particular detection, something has to happen in order to ensure that we don't have risks. So it provides the town or the respondent the ability to come in, study the problem, and get at some kind of solution that is protective of human health. The good news is that in Southeast region, and I would say other parts of the Commonwealth where other colleagues of mine work, whether it's Central region, Northeast region, or Western region, we are watching this very closely. So through the monitoring, Mass DEP has an opportunity to jump in, work with the affected parties or with the parties that are responsible for ensuring that there's an immediate response action and get at the problem.
And this is a follow-up point because this all ties in together because people want to know how much PFAS would cause significant health issues. And I know both Millie, your answer, and to Jim, it kind of ties into this other question, which was how long in exposure for years would it take for PFAS to actually make you sick? And it's kind of tough to answer that because it depends on a whole host of things. Are you healthy? What has been the limits in the communities that you've lived in? I'm not sure there's an exact way to really answer that question to give people the full peace of mind they may be looking for.
Right. So comment that noted something that's very important. The 20 parts per trillion or nanograms per liter is associated with non-cancer risks. The science, toxicology is still evolving and emerging, as Kathy described. And therefore, we need to continue to work very closely with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, ATSDR, which is the agency for substance, I can get you the acronym, but basically it's the agency that's titled with doing a lot of that epidemiological research. And now the focus is whether we should now be thinking about any potential cancer risks. But again, this is an emerging issue the science is changing. We are working, everyone across nation territories, working as hard as we can and as fast as we can to better understand the science behind perfluorinated compounds.
And I'm just doing one last check because does anybody
Brian,
else want to add in on that? Jim?
Brian, this further in this ORS memo, it's also discussing how this is set, this level was set in considering your entire exposure to PFAS. So it's in our food, it's in our wrappings for our food. So you're getting other exposures. And so this is a very conservative, I think, level that the science has driven them to set this standard. So there's other pathways that you're exposed to, and the 20 is a lifetime exposure that is anticipated not to elevate any risk to your health for most people.
Thank you. Now, and we really only have two more PFAS related questions. So at that point, the folks from Mass DEP, you'll have an opportunity to stay if you want, but you've been here for over 2 hours. There was a question about where could someone get the demographics, racial data, and also the age of water treatment plants across the state. I know the demographics are available in the U.S. Census as far as racial and ethnic back data. Is there a list anywhere of the age of water treatment plants specifically?
Well, that could be an exercise of a question that we could answer with a little bit of time. You know, when you think about it, I think I reported approximately 473 public water supplies, Jim, and then that's going to translate into X number of potential filtration plants. So, Jim, I defer to you, but I think it's something that we can identify. We just need a little bit of time to do that.
Sure.
It's not an easy question because it raises a lot more questions, but I think that it might be a safe bet to say that Randolph-Holbrook has the oldest treatment plant active in the state, or maybe tied with Braintree. Not too many treatment plants. I think it's a testament to the workers of the 1930s that you have a treatment plant that really was living up to the treatment requirements of modern day. But you also are comparing apples to oranges when you say treatment plants, because you have groundwater plants, you have small plants, large plants. It's a wide gamut.
And I believe that is all of the PFAS related questions. If people who are watching this do send emails afterwards, we will certainly reach out to the folks from Mass DEP to provide any additional answers and backup. We're going to continue to provide this on the town's website. So I would like to thank the folks from Mass DEP for joining us here tonight for the past 2 hours, both the presentation and answering questions. We do have some additional questions for Andrew and for Helen. So hopefully you're willing to stay a little bit longer to deal with issues specifically with the new water treatment plant, unidirectional flushing, things of that idea. But I try to do the PFAS stuff up front so that the entire team, and there's been an impressive and large team that you brought here tonight, would have an opportunity to leave, and we'll continue to ask additional questions. So to the folks from Mass DEP, thank you. We will forward any other questions that come in from folks who watch this. This is going to be replayed over and over and over on our local community television channel and on our Facebook channel. So thank you very much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you, Brian, for your leadership, as well as Chris. It's been really an honor and a pleasure to work with your team as well. And I know that you are committed to resolving the issue, and we really commend you for all your extraordinary efforts. So on behalf of Southeast Region, we stand ready to serve and assist in any way we can. And I just want to say thank you, Kathy, if you have additional remarks. I know that you got in front of it very quickly, you jumped into action, and you continue to be responsive. And we're very happy to be here of service.
Millie, I think you said it all. We look at ourselves at Mass DEP as your partner. We're interested in helping you find funding and solve this issue, and we're here to answer your questions. And I already sent off an email asking for follow-up information on some of those unanswered questions. So thank you very much for hosting us.
And if
Thank
Deneen,
you. Thank you very much.
Environmental Justice, Deneen, any questions?
Sure. Thank you, Millie. Thank you to the town of Randolph. And I am available anytime to answer any questions regarding Mass DEP's Environmental Justice Program, and any questions that I can answer related to this presentation this evening. I can certainly reach out to DEP staff to assist. So thank you again for having us, and look forward to further discussions.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Great night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Andrew, and I feel bad keeping you a little bit longer, but Helen and Andrew, thank you for staying throughout the presentation you made right now. Most of these questions we've answered both within the presentation, but during other water meetings that we've had. But let's try and see if we can bullet point through some of these. So somebody asked the question, is the town going to lower home water pressure per the White House? I can say that we will never lower the water pressure at a point that in any way it would affect firefighting apparatus. So in the short run, folks, at no point would we entertain doing anything that would lower the pressure in our ability to, to fight fires, because quite frankly, that first and foremost is one of our key points of data. Somebody asked, is buying spring water tax deductible? I suspect not, but we can try and get an answer to that question. Again, you'll be welcome to use the water kiosk that the town is opening up within the next 2 weeks. Jesse Gordon's question, yes, we're going to make it available for everybody, and we're going to try and find a secondary location in town. Helen, the new water treatment plant, sufficient for all 3 towns? I know that it is, because I've been in those meetings and you guys have talked how much water in gallons are going to go out of that. But the short answer?
Yes.
The staff of the new water treatment plant, because of the new technology, will additional staff have to be hired or trained to work at the plant when it's completed?
So there's already existing staff both in Braintree and Randolph, and there'll be a plan put together on the requirements of the operators, and they'll be trained appropriately during startup. They do already carry licenses that they require.
There's a resident who asked specifically about low water pressure in their neighborhood, and they've experienced for the past few days. I cannot stress enough, if you are experiencing low pressure, please call the DPW. We will update, and this person said that specifically they usually get updates because we're flushing hydrants, and they were unsure as to why it was low. It could be the start of a water main break on your street. So please, if you are experiencing in any way lower pressure than usual, reach out to the DPW so we can see whether there's another issue going on. Because otherwise, yes, between the website and social media, we're always going to try and let you know exactly what we're doing in regard to the issue of water pressure matters that you may deal with. Andy, multi-tiered question. I know you said approximately 99% of the town's water pipes have been lined. Somebody asked the question, and I don't know that you'd be able to answer this off the top of your head, but how many linear feet of pipes does Randolph have in total?
I believe it's 110 miles. I did have that in the presentation, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Is there any lead pipes in our water distribution system? And what effect
No,
would they or could they
No.
have?
Lead pipes in the distribution system? No, there may be some lead services, but every time we've done any water work, lead services have been replaced. So that's not a concern.
Back to the water treatment plant. There was some questions about the contract. Will there be a penalty clause written into the contract? So if the general contractor is delayed in finishing the project at the time, will there be, for example, a fine of $10,000 a day? Basically, municipal contracts generally do put these in. I know we had them on a number of our other projects. Helen?
Yes, so any project of this size would have liquidated damages associated with it. Once we complete design, as I said, we will put together a detailed schedule in anticipation of what we believe the contractor can meet. And then we will include a date called a substantial completion date in the contract, which is part of Chapter 149, which we're bidding under. And then if they go over that date, if it's not for a condition that they have no control over, then liquidated damages can be assessed.
Thank you. Will the Braintree plant be serviced by both Braintree Electric and National Grid as a backup? In addition to that, will there be emergency generators, and will they be natural gas or diesel fuel?
The generators, the backup generators will be diesel fuel, and Nat Grid is the electric service over on the Braintree on Braintree side of the pond.
Will there be on the diesel fuel a fuel storage tank located on the property?
Yes, but it will be on the side of the treatment plant that's not wouldn't flow to the water supply, and there would be a containment unit underneath it. So,
is there going to be solar or renewable energy involved in the plant?
Well, the plant in of itself and all the processes that are going to be put into place, and also the fact that we're going to have SCADA, result in a more efficient treatment plant compared to what you have now. So automatically you'll be doing better on the electrical. All buildings, public buildings the size that we're dealing with right now do have to be designed now under standards that could carry solar arrays on the roofs if the community, if Triton decided to add that in as an option. Currently, it is not part of the existing design.
This question is probably more Helen, but Helen or Andrew, why can't the water department treat the water so that there is less
Magnesium.
Magnesium, iron sediment? Because they believe that it's impacting water heaters, major appliances, their toilet, etc. I know I've lived in North Randolph, South Randolph. I've not experienced these issues, but this resident says that they are experiencing this issue. We do the best we can with the type of water that we have. Helen.
So the new treatment plant will take out the iron and manganese better than what the plant is doing right now. And that's part of the goal of the new treatment plant. So it's total treatment for all constituents that you need to deal with. So you will have a reduction in the iron and manganese levels.
At that time?
Yes.
In addition to that, there's a question about the town reimbursing homeowners on this topic. And I can say that if you follow, in particular with your water heater, the requirements which whenever I talk to residents, 99% of folks, myself included, you're supposed to flush your water heater once a year, in some cases twice. And if you do that, the sediment issue won't be a problem. But most people, again, don't do that. That is the best way to deal with this issue. A lot of your other appliances have filters. You need to make sure you're staying on top of those filters. Andrew and Chris, anything additional that you would suggest for folks to want to monitor the issue of sediment that they may be experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows if you have hard water, you'll see it in your toilets or sinks. You'll see that build up, and if you do, you want to talk to somebody about how you can, clean that out, or there are house filters that people get. If that's an issue, that's what I would recommend. I have one at my house
Now,
for that reason.
Real quickly, speaking of that, because as I've mentioned, I talk to residents every day. I talk to businesses every day, and I've lived both in South and North Randolph over the last 55 years. I've not had those issues. So how does, and in some cases, somebody will say to me that they live less than 2 streets from me. We go down, we check the pipes, everything looks good. How can those differences occur so closely to people who are neighbors?
Brian, Brian, one of the things that a lot of people don't really know, or not really up on, is the age of their service line to their particular house. You could have a house that's 50 years old next to a house that's 10 years old, and there's a significant difference in their service line from the curb stop in. Like you said, keeping up with the appliance maintenance recommendations is another way. And then if there are filters on the system, changing those filters at the required times. We see any number of issues with dirty water, cloudy water on a daily basis, and most of the time, the issue isn't necessarily in the street. It's we see those problems within the resident's home.
There was a question about the cost of Randolph residents for these improvements. We talked a bit about it. It's a moving target. Each year we set the water rates with about $8 million set aside. We run on an enterprise fund. So basically, the water and sewer in the town is separated out as far as the funding for that. So definitely there are cost improvements. As Andrew mentioned earlier, we've spent $35 million lining the pipes over the last 20 years. Questions about the issue of brown water, discolored water. I know that a lot of folks have said, I don't get it. Why do others get it? And the short answer is, and I know Helen and Andrew can speak to this, this goes back to when, unfortunately, we had the main pump went down. That really started that trigger a few years ago. I will say on a day-to-day basis for the last couple of years, the only time that we see issues with water is when we're doing flushing, if there's a water main break in the area, whether or not it's been the fire departments had to tap the service anywhere in the area. What other things could cause the issue of brown discolored water, and why some neighborhoods versus others?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, when you're, flushing, or if, I think at the water treatment plant, there's been some off and on inconsistent movement. If water's moving the opposite direction of it typically does, you're going to slough off some sediment and you're going to get that. So if there's inconsistent pumping, or if you're flushing in a certain direction opposed to that, and that's the purpose of the unidirectional flushing, is to get that moving. So that's why that happens.
I know this question's been asked many times. When the water is discolored, therefore it could be rusty looking, is it okay to drink it? And visually, nobody would want to. And that's why we always say to folks, flush cold water only in your home, in particular in your bathtub, while the brown water issue may be happening. But if somebody did ingest it, healthy, and I don't want to call it healthy because nobody wants to drink that, water that's like that. But my understanding is that it's certainly not going to cause significant health issues.
Yeah, there's plenty of testing done. Discolored water, as you said, nobody's going to want to drink it, but there's no evidence that that's a health issue.
But again, we're in no way recommending it. And again, if you have any issues with discolored water, please make sure that you contact the DPW so we can find out, specifically in your neighborhood what may be driving that issue. Currently, our water treatment flushing program is the most common reason why that may occur, separate of a water main break. The water kiosk, will it be sanitary in regard to COVID? The short answer is, just like all the other water kiosks that have been out there during COVID, you shouldn't have to actually touch the nozzle or anything of that nature. Helen, Chris, what can you add to that?
I think what we'll do, Brian, is we'll set up some sort of sanitary dispenser next to the kiosk itself. So if anybody wanted to wipe it down prior to use, I think that would be the simplest solution to it. We'll just have to keep an eye on it, make sure it's fully stocked.
Somebody was specifically asking about rusted pipes north of Pine Street and east of North Main Street. Do you intend on replacing them? Based on the map and everything we've seen tonight, Andrew, those have all been either replaced or lined. Is there any other additional issue?
Not that I know of. Where is that again? East.
They're listing themselves north of Pine, east of North Main.
East of North Main. I think, as far as I know, at least internally, all those pipes have been cement lined internally.
So I would say that if this individual wants to reach out to us, we have a camera that we can send down to take a look if there's some issue there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know specifically the street, and we can look back at, what was done, and if they're on the list of, what we have lined, then we could let them know that. Certainly the outside appearance of a pipe does not indicate, the
right.
interior condition.
A resident asked, why should the residents have to pay to outfit filters at the treatment plant? Basically, we are an enterprise fund. The town is supported by the water rates, and we're in this together. We're going to continue to get every grant, every state-funded opportunity we can to lower the cost of this. But ultimately, the water and sewer is an enterprise fund that is used to fund and maintain the water treatment plant. Somebody asked about boiling water, even bottled water, about cooking their pasta. I would say that if you make sure that the water you're getting is specifically PFAS free, and we're going to be offering that here in Randolph, that won't be an issue. But they did say that if you boil water and there's PFAS in it, it may concentrate it. So I would suggest that you'll be able to get our water, which we know will not have that issue there. Do car washes contribute to any of the water problems we're having? Chris and Andrew, how do these folks get their water? How do they maintain the water? Stormwater concerns, car washes.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly don't, they don't contribute to a water quality issue. It's probably more stormwater issue, their discharge. I mean, they're getting town water, I assume. They certainly don't contribute. I mean, other than, you do have a surface water source, but I don't think there's a large issue there.
Anything you'd like to add in additional to that, Chris?
It'd be interesting to see what their discharge is, or what the method is. I'd have to, see what the actual design is. If it, the water that's collected after it's, been mixed with the soap, is that being discharged into the sewer system? I'd be surprised if it's direct discharge into the storm water, but you never know. We've in the last couple of years, I've run across a dry cleaning company that was discharging soapy water directly into the storm drain system, which was discharging ultimately into one of the streams that was causing some problems for us, that soapy water downstream. So we were able to get them to stop what they were doing and correct their problem.
And we are down to the final two questions that I can tell. This one, they spoke to already, but environmental working groups, there are 7 companies in Randolph where PFAS discharge is suspected and could be becoming part of the PFAS contamination. As the state said, they are continuing to look at how they're going to, because let's face it, there is a number of industries that may be playing a role statewide, and the DEP is trying to determine exactly how they're going to go after this issue. I will say that we locally, whatever the DEP allows us to do, we'll certainly look to do in dealing with this issue. And we're going to be doing some enhanced testing to also look at this issue. Specifically, Councilor Gordon had asked a series of questions which we asked tonight. He had asked about the time frames of being able to install an interim PFAS filter system at the water treatment plant. Helen, if we had gone that route, and again, this is something you'd have to get the town of Holbrook and the town of Randolph be on the same page to say, this is the best way to handle this. But I know, for example, Easton, it's about 2.5 years from beginning to end for them to deal with their issue. Is that similar to the time frames we would have been dealing with?
Yeah, so first of all, it's very individual depending on the situation. It would be that time frame. One of the challenges I did on the presentation show some of the areas where we might be able to place vessels if we were going to go with vessels. And we'd have to do a complete analysis, a structural analysis on whether or not the said basins could carry that weight if we were going to put it there. There's a number of other things that we need to do in terms of permitting and design associated with that. The other alternative, and so that would be around a 2-year period from start to finish. And then also, even if we were going to look at doing something similar to what Braintree did, which was change their filtration media to GAC, the reason that wasn't chosen is because you have to rehab all 8 of your filters before you do that, which includes a significant additional capital cost for the under drains to be replaced and so forth. So yeah, you're talking, a year and a half, 2 years. And so that was, and that significant amount of money. And then about a year or 2 after that, you'll have a new water treatment plant up and running.
And the final question, which is kind of tied into this, Councilor Gordon was kind of looking at the $2.5 million plus that would be looked at if we were to try and in that 2.5-year period get this plant up and running, and that cost would be about $25 per person per year. If Braintree and Holbrook residents were willing to do that, when could the construction cost? I looked at it a little bit differently. I took the number of folks in Randolph, divided that by the total, and my numbers showed that to be probably about $135 a year. But there is no question for all the reasons that have already been discussed, based on where our water treatment plant is, where it's located near the water, the fact that it doesn't have the size that Braintree had in their plant, the fact that we are going to be doing the same thing that Easton did and supply water for those who would like to have water below the 20 number, which again was discussed tonight, that is the number that is a very aggressive number by the state in setting. So, I'll crunch some more numbers for Jesse on this. However, I do think that when you look at, we have, give or take, about 9,500 water households / businesses users in the town. So you can't look at, based on population, you have to really look at the individual water users. In addition, you'd have to get the town of Randolph and the town of Braintree to agree on that methodology. And you have Randolph and its town council, and you'd have Holbrook in their town meeting. So we have come to the end of a very long evening. I do want to thank everybody who helped put this together, in particular, Helen, Andrew, Chris, for being here throughout the entire evening, Randolph Community Television. We had our tech individual for the town of Randolph, Bill Clark, downstairs in the Washington room, Liz LaRossi and Jerry Cody, Liz with our community programming, and Jerry with he's the commissioner of the Board of Health. This has been something we're going to replay over and over. This video will be available on RCTV, on YouTube, and again on the town's Facebook page. And all of these documents will be placed on the town's website so that people can read them. And if there's any questions that we weren't able to fully answer tonight, Mass DEP will provide us additional information. I think it's important for the residents to know that we are in a historic time right now. It took decades to get the town of Braintree, the town of Holbrook, and the town of Randolph to agree on a plan. We've changed the governing structure that was written over 100 years ago, that's been passed through all three towns and passed by the legislature. We have the MOU, which is getting completed. We are at 60% design on the water treatment plant. We've spent $35 million lining the water pipes. In addition, we are doing a water treatment, a flushing program, Uni-Directional, which we showed you the video, that is costing us a few $100,000 to complete. So we're being as aggressive as we can within the situation as it presents itself. We are also meeting any of the requirements that Mass DEP will place on us, and we will meet any notifications that they require. And I cannot stress enough, sign up for the town's emergency notification system, go to the town's website so that you want to get additional information at any point. We have the ability to email and text, and in some cases phone call. I please urge you to do that. And finally, both Chris, myself, and Jerry Cody are probably the big three when it comes to dealing with one-on-one questions that you may have. Do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll do the best that we can to answer those questions. So I want to thank everybody for participating this evening. It has been a real deep dive on everything from PFAS to the new water treatment plant to water distribution. So hopefully people found it extremely informative, long, but informative. So thank you all for watching tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.